Hi Booktube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing very well. Today I've got a bit of a book haul for you. I hope it won't be too long. I've got, I think, 10 books here that I've picked up over the last few weeks. And it feels like quite a nerdy book haul. There's a fair bit of poetry in here, but there are two works of fiction in there, so please hold out. But we'll start off with, what is this? A kind of retelling of mythology, a classic retelling of mythology, and it's Bullfinchs Mythology. And this is, it says a modern abridgment by Edmund Fuller. So it's not the whole thing, but it gives you the rough idea. And I'm happy for this, just to sort of dip in and get an idea. And it's got a lot of the Greek and Roman stuff, as well as it says here the mythology of the Germanic tribes, so hopefully some Viking stuff, and mythology of apparently of England and of the Near East. And then it's got the legend of Charlemagne in here, and also the age of chivalry, which seems to be mainly King Arthur and stuff. So I'm looking forward just to have, just having this to dip in and out of. I love the way it looks as well, and I love the Rossetti on the front. So yeah, as I said, one to sort of dip in and out of. But that's Bullfinchs Mythology. Next up, I'm currently in the middle, or just starting out, reading through the Kantos by Ezra Pound, which, if you're not familiar with them, it's a very odd, very difficult, long poem that he spent most of his life writing. The loose description he gave for it was that it's a poem describing history, and there are all of these literary references, all of these historical references, all swirling, and they're all over the place. I've tried reading them before and sort of gave up. I was borrowing it from the library when I was in university, so sort of ran out of time, and I've not tried for quite a while. But at the moment, me and Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics, and Greg from another Bibliophile Reads, we're giving it our best effort, and they've both picked up guides, and I thought I'd try and pick up a guide to the Kantos as well. So I picked up this. It's only a short little thing, but this is Pound the Kantos by George Kearns, and the way I'm thinking of this is that it'll work. It kind of works like the introduction, and the kind of critical material you might have, if included in the book. It doesn't really include what you might think of as the footnotes, so it's not going to give us every little detail. It's not going into the weeds, but it's giving context, and a little bit of grounding for each section of the Kantos. After starting this, I've also found a thing online called the Kantos Project, and that goes into a bit more detail, so I can use that for translating things that are in other languages and recognising references to certain figures that I'm not familiar with and stuff. Whereas, yeah, this is for more of a general view of the taking a step back and looking at things a little more architecturally. And the Kantos themselves, just to give you an idea, are very long. Here they are. So I think we'll be reading these for quite some time. I'm going at quite a slow pace at the moment. Next, we've got two books by the same poet. Poet I'm trying to get to know better. I read seriously for the first time last year, and really enjoyed his selected poems, which was mainly his earlier period. So I was thinking of getting something from towards the end of his career, and the poet in question is John Ashbery. So I picked up this. This is Parallel Movements of the Hands, which is 5 long, unfinished poems that he was working on before he died. It's been edited by Emily Skillings, and it's got a foreword by John Lerner. And we'll see what it's like, but it's it might be a bit of a jump between the Ashbury of the 60s, 70s, and 80s to Ashbury in the 2010s. So we'll see what it's like, but I'm hoping to get to know him better. So at some point it will serve its purpose very well. And then also I read these selected poems, but I wanted to look at what collections those poems were being taken from, and then just to pick up those collections as well, to read the poems included in a bit more context. And so I picked up one of his most celebrated collections, and I was quite delighted to find it, because I've been he's one of those poets I just look for in bookshops now, and I hadn't seen him in the main poetry section, but then there was this high shelf sort of by another section that had other poetry books, some of them a bit bulkier, and maybe, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure why they were kept separate from the rest, and they were quite high up, but then I just caught the name, and so I got up on my tiptoes and got it, and it was Self-Portrait in a Convex Mirror, which was seemed to be the collection that what's the word I'm thinking of? It's kind of made his name. I think it sort of consolidated him as a poet to be taken seriously, and certainly made him a bit more of a name in the poetry world over here. I think he was already very highly regarded before then in the US, but certainly in the UK this collection was very important. So looking forward to reading those poems in context. And it on the back here it gives us a brief quotation from a review of the book from The Independent from when it came out, and the reviewer Michael Glover says that it's like riding a wild though smoothly flowing roller coaster, which is just a great way of describing Ashbury's poetry. It kind of feels crazy and out of control, and yet it runs so smoothly, and in a strange way it's very pleasurable to read, even though the poems themselves are difficult and elude any kind of straightforward reading. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that description. Then next up, a poet I've not read before, but was really curious to try. I've been watching a few videos from the channel Orpheus recently, and Drake from that channel really loves this poet and has said that he's basically the best poet still alive and writing. And the poet in question goes by the name Adonis, or I'm never entirely sure how to say it. I think it's Adonis is how you say it. And this is his selected poems. So his full name is Ali Ahmad Saeed Esber, and he's a Syrian poet, I think living in France. And essentially in the Arabic speaking world, he's got the reputation that someone like T.S. Eliot has over here. And I was just flicking through the table of contents, and just some of the titles are so evocative. The one that really stood out to me was The Child Running Inside Memory, and yeah, Beginnings of the Body, Ends of the Sea. That's one of his collections. Yeah, I think I'm going to enjoy it a lot, and I certainly don't know much about certainly more contemporary, more avant-garde Middle Eastern poetry. So I'm really looking forward to discovering him and seeing what he's like. And then a poet whose name I recognise, but I'm not entirely sure where I first heard of him or anything like that. But it's George Safaris. This is collected poems, translated, edited, and introduced by Edmund Keeley and Philip Sherard. I should say with Adonis or Adonis, it's translated by Khaled Matawa, and he was Adonis's translator of choice. He sort of singled him out to translate his poems, which I found really interesting. But anyway, back to George Safaris, a more modern Greek poet that I've sort of heard his name thrown around, but I've never read him. And I suppose really the only poet from roughly the same period, although Safaris is a generation or two younger, would be C.P. Cavafy. And so we'll see what Safaris is like. Apparently his poetry is very stripped down of ornaments, which can be very good. I'm all up for that. So we'll see what it's like. But some of these poems are very, very short. So we'll see what it's like. But just generally, I don't have much experience with Greek poetry. And so, trying to step out and just trying to get as much poetry and translation as I can. And then moving back to a poet and a writer generally that's very much, it seems like, my own home base, someone I'm very comfortable with, and really need to read a lot more by, and that's Thomas Hardy. And I've been wanting to get more of his poetry, and often a lot of the sort of second-hand editions of selected poems and collected poems by Hardy are really, really ugly, and I don't know why. At least a lot of the ones I've found have been. And so I found this that I quite liked the look of, and it's his selected short stories and poems. So we've got a good selection of short stories, and then a few poems that are arranged by rough subject matter. So we've got poems on love, on home and family, on faith and doubts, lyrics and meditations. We've got nature poems, poems about war, poems about narrative or narrative poems maybe, and then occasional poems as well. But then it's got short stories by him as well, and a good 140 pages or so of the book as a whole are the short stories, and then there's about another 50 pages or so of poetry. So we'll see what it's like, but they're both areas. Well, with his poetry, I've read a few poems in anthologies, but I've never read any of Hardy's short stories. So we'll see what they're like. Then on to some travel writing. An author where I've got another book of theirs waiting to be read, but I think I'll get to this one first. It's Vincent Cronin. He's also written a history of the Renaissance. I've got his book on the Florentine Renaissance somewhere behind me. But this is The Golden Honeycomb, a Sicilian Quest. And the title is taken from a story about this golden honeycomb that's given to Daedalus, and it's said to have, it's said to have so it's a honeycomb that Daedalus offers to Aphrodite in return to being able to escape from King Minos of Crete. And essentially, Cronin, I'm guessing it's then, I'm guessing that it's said that this golden honeycomb is from Sicily. I'm guessing you have to kind of infer that. But basically, Cronin decides to go to Sicily to work out whether there's any sort of basis to the story, anything behind the myth, and in so doing gets a good taste of Sicily, an area of the world I'd like to visit eventually. We'll see when. I'm planning to visit Malta next year, and so maybe Sicily will be somewhere after Malta. But yeah, it's got, unfortunately, only black and white pictures, but it'll be enough to give a rough idea of the book, of the area, I should say. It's got a very brief blurb from my boy, my guy, Patrick Lee Firmer, who I love. He says it's honey from Hibla, so we'll see if he's right, and see if I work out what Hibla is. Hybla. And then 2 more to go, and this is the fiction. So if you're here for the fiction, then here we go. First up, we've got some Colette, a writer that I haven't read. Well, I've read one short story by Colette, which I really liked. I found it really, really effective, and yeah, I'll just say effective, without going into too much detail about the story. But I picked up Sherry and the Last of Sherry, a story about a young man who essentially is involved with a middle-aged woman who is a courtesan, and so it's by the sounds of things, a very dirty French book. But yeah, we'll see what it's like. It sounds very dramatic. Yeah, a young man entangled with this courtesan who then falls in love, but then, you know, he's got this complex relationship with Leia, the courtesan, and can't get her out of his head. So we'll see what it's like. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to know Colette, as she's a writer I've heard a fair bit about. And then a book that came up recently when I was talking about Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, and sort of someone just saying that, yeah, there's someone in the comments was saying that there's a kind of parallel between this book and Northanger Abbey, and that's Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons, and I've seen this, you know, edition of it at my sort of the closest secondhand bookshop to where I live, but it was really beaten up and was covered in highlighters and stuff, and so I found this one at another secondhand bookshop, and it's practically unread, but this sounds really delightful. And actually, this, probably out of most of them, this is the one I'm itching the most to get to. I think I will just read the whole synopsis of this one. So it says, when sensible, sophisticated Flora Post is orphaned at 19, she decides her only choice is to descend upon relatives in deepest Sussex. At the aptly named Cold Comfort Farm, she meets the doomed Starcadders, cousin Judith, heaving with remorse for unspoken wickedness, Amos, preaching fire and damnation, their sons, lustful Seth and despairing Reuben, the child of nature, Elphine, and crazed old Aunt Ada Doom, who is kept to her bedroom for the last 20 years. But Flora loves nothing better than to organise other people. Armed with common sense and a strong will, she resolves to take each of the family in hand. And so we'll see. Yeah, it seems a hilarious and merciless parody of rural melodramas. Cold Comfort Farm is one of the best loved comic novels of all times. And I'm currently reading Middlemarch, so maybe once I'm done with Middlemarch, this will be a nice contrast to that. So that's Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons, and just sounds delightful. So I'll do a Steve Pyramid. So in review, we've got Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons. We've got Colette, Sherry and The Last of Sherry, 2 short, dirty French books. The Golden Honeycomb by Vincent Cronin, selected stories and poems by Thomas Hardy. George Safaris, collected poems. Adonis, his selected poems. John Ashbery, self-portrait in a convex mirror and parallel movement of the hands. Pound, the Kantos by George Kearns. And finally, The Golden Bough, not The Golden Bough, Bullfinchs Mythology, abridged by Edmund Fuller. So there we go, that's my little book haul for today. Hopefully there was at least something interesting in there for you. And if you're familiar with any of these and have read any of them, and if you think there's one I should start with out of any of them, yeah, please feel free to let me know, and it'll be good to know what you think. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Hope you've had a lovely day, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.